Hey guys, Stanixos here. So today we'll be talking about how strong Whitebeard is. Now, I know quite a few of you would probably like a full discourse on how strong Prime Whitebeard or Prime Beard is. However, truthfully, there really just isn't much to talk about there. I mean, for example, we know that Whitebeard was as strong as Roger, being one of the few persons that could fight him to a standstill, and Roger, who was the Pirate King, was basically the strongest pirate. However, we don't currently have enough information to give a specific quantification of Roger's strength outside of generalities. And I mean, if I were just going to compare him to people like Chinjao, who easily split a continent, or Kaido, the strongest creature in the world, then I just refer to my Gear 5 Luffy video where all of that is broken down from the start to the end and just say that Prime Beard is at least on that level. So we won't be speaking about Prime Beard here, but rather in this video, my aim is to give a proper contextualized view of how strong Sick Whitebeard or Sick Beard is compared to other prominent characters. So with that understood, let us get into the video. Now let's start off with his attack potency. Now, we don't really get to see much of Sickbeard outside of the Marineford War, and one of the best data points for scaling reference happens closer to the end of the war with his fight against Akainu. You see, in this fight, we saw where Whitebeard was able to completely immobilize Akainu in just 2 hits. Now to be clear here, Akainu was not knocked out to the point of unconsciousness, but it was clear that he was completely incapacitated, as it was unambiguously shown to us that he was not able to prop himself up on the broken ground as it fell down into the fissure. And again, to be clear, Akainu did return in 2 chapters after this incapacitation, but that doesn't change the fact that Whitebeard's attack potency was strong enough to incapacitate him in just 2 hits. Just as how Queen returning in 1 chapter doesn't change the fact that Big Mom's attack potency was strong enough to completely knock him out in 2 hits. Now yes, I'm sure you already know, the Admirals are the Marines' greatest force, and thus are some of the strongest characters in the series. So of course, this 2-hit incapacitation is very impactful, but for you to truly understand how impactful this is, we need to add the relevant contextual layers. So firstly, Akainu is obviously pretty durable. One clear example of this is that in the war, while he was dealing with Jinbei, Vista and Marco did a sneak attack on him while using Haki. And so as to ensure there was no confusion, Oda even had Akainu tell us that they attacked him using Haki. But with a mere Akainu just completely shrugged off the combined attack of 2 of Whitebeard's strongest commanders, who were obviously not holding back, given that they were furious that Akainu had just killed Ace. But yet, in just 2 shots, Whitebeard was able to incapacitate this same Akainu. So that on its own is already pretty impressive, and for any other character we probably would just stop here. But this is Whitebeard we're talking about. So that is merely the first layer. Because remember, at the start of the fight, Whitebeard had already gotten a significant wound from Squardo, who caught him off guard. Like, there is no doubt that this wound was significant, because he was shown to be bleeding from his mouth from there on after throughout the entire Marineford arc. So Whitebeard was already significantly wounded before he even started with Akainu, and immediately prior to these 2 attacks, which incapacitated Akainu, Whitebeard had a heart attack mid-fight, which he was visibly shown to be greatly affected by and was even spitting up blood. And to make matters worse, literally during this heart attack, Akainu came in to give him a full force magma punch directly to the chest. Yet even in this state, his first punch was still able to do significant damage to Akainu, and then immediately following this, half of his head was then literally ripped off by Akainu. But even in this post-impaled, post-heart attack, post-magma punch hole in the chest, and post-half-head gone state, Whitebeard was still able to incapacitate Akainu with his second punch. Like, at this point, I'm hoping you appreciate just how insane Whitebeard's attack potency is. But that is still not even the end, because we know that there's an added layer of the fact that far before Whitebeard came to Marineford, he had been sick for a long while, with his condition progressively deteriorating. Like you'll know throughout the various encounters when we see him, he was always connected to various medical equipment. We see this when Shanks came aboard his ship, and we also see this with his various flashbacks with Ace. Like even before going to the Marineford War, Whitebeard opted to take off his medical equipment because he didn't want his enemies to feel sorry for him, and it was literally stated that his condition had been progressively getting worse. We see this in the Ace novel where Marco implored him to stop fighting against Ace as it was speeding up his death, and we also saw this at Marineford after Squardo impaled him. Marco reiterated that this was because of his condition getting gradually worse, because it doesn't matter if he was off guard, he should have been able to dodge Squardo's attack. So there was no doubt that this sickness had taken away quite a bit of his fighting ability compared to his prime. And remember, this was further compounded on by the fact that even characters who aren't sick comment that simply due to their aging, they are nowhere close to their prime. We see this for example with Rayleigh, who remarks that he probably can't beat Blackbeard in his current old state, and Garp, who specifically mentions that due to his age, he can't throw his cannonballs as fast anymore. Even Whitebeard himself acknowledged that he can't be the strongest forever. And just to give you a concrete idea of just how bad Whitebeard's condition was before he had ever laid his hands on Akainu, note that when Ace was about to be executed for the first time, Whitebeard was shown to try to use his Conqueror's Haki incapacitation, but he just couldn't do it. Remember, Whitebeard was a man who, in his prime, was clashing equally with Roger with his Conqueror's Haki infusion as a mere introduction to their fight. But now, in this war, he couldn't even muster up Conqueror's Haki incapacitation, the literal lowest level. And like for a conscious Whitebeard to not be able to use even Conqueror's Haki incapacitation when even an Act 1 Wano Luffy, who was completely knocked out by Kaido, was still able to use his Conqueror's Haki incapacitation in this completely unconscious state, this just shows you how far Whitebeard had fell in comparison to his previous 6 states, much less his prime state. Yet this Whitebeard, with so many layers of debuffs, was able to incapacitate a Navy Admiral in just 2 hits and was causing earthquakes all throughout the One Piece world. So I'm hoping this gives you an idea of just how strong Whitebeard's attack potency is and why before the war, some people were unsure about if the world would still be there the next day. Now, before closing off, I want to talk about Sickbeard's durability. So I often see the argument that Whitebeard is weak because he was hurt by swords and cannon wounds from fodder. Now, firstly, I wouldn't necessarily call Navy Vice Admirals fodder, but I do understand the sentiment, especially when you compare to someone like Kaido, who even a post-Whole Cake Island Gear 4 Luffy couldn't even scratch, and who even characters like Kiemon, even with a full force, a full body sword attack, could barely even pierce. However, again, just as a reminder, Whitebeard was severely deteriorating. Like even while sick, but before Marineford, we saw where initially Ace could not even scratch Whitebeard's skin with his flames, and this was the same Ace who had been invited to become a warlord and who was able to fight to a standstill with Jinbei. So even in comparison to his previous sick self, Marineford Whitebeard had severely deteriorated. However, even with this, I do think people are looking at this through an incorrect lens. For example, Axon Morgan, who we can say without a doubt is actually fodder, was able to wound Garp. Now, does that mean that Garp is weak or is not durable? Of course not. Like looking at the minimum amount of force required to cause damage to a person is indeed one aspect of their durability, but it isn't actually the main component. The actual best metric to look at is how much they can take overall. So yes, quote-unquote fodder like Squardo and like the Marine Vice Admirals were able to meet the minimum threshold to be able to cause damage to Whitebeard. However, Whitebeard also took much stronger attacks, like for example Kizaru's laser beams and Akaino's magma punch to the chest and having half his head ripped off, and he was able to continue fighting. Like that is a pretty durable character, though some of you may understand better if I use the word endurance here. And like I'll even hear some people say that the only reason Whitebeard was able to do enough damage to incapacitate Akaino in 2 hits was because he caught Akaino off guard for the first hit. But let us not forget that Akaino's first major hit to Whitebeard was while Whitebeard was off guard mid-heart attack. And this was on the background of Whitebeard having already taken another sneak attack from Squardo at the literal start of the war. Yet Whitebeard did not fall and was not incapacitated by Akaino's attack. As a matter of fact, even after Akaino's second hit on Whitebeard, which ripped off half his head, Whitebeard was able to continue fighting not only against Akaino, whom was then incapacitated by Whitebeard's second hit, but even against Blackbeard, who came immediately after this. So a Marineford Bear's durability, though nothing like what it was in his prime, or even his prior 6 states, was still on a completely different level, and thus he was able to die proudly standing without ever suffering a coward's wound. But anyway, that's the video guys. You can let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video. But anyway, see you guys next time.